Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. So we're going to go to how do we integrate the trigonometry functions, and we're going to just focus on cosine in this video. In the subsequent videos, we're going to talk about sine, sec squared, and the rest of it. All right, before I proceed, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you've not and click the notification bell, please do so. So when I upload the new videos on sine, sec squared, and the rest of it, and other rules, you will be the first person to know. All right, so let's get straight into this. So there is an interesting relationship between sine and cosine, also between tan and sec squared, okay? So I'm going to write it down. So it was similar to what we did in differentiation, but it's just going to be the opposite in integration. So I'm going to write it down because I'm aware some of you do take note. All right, so there is an interesting relationship okay, between sine and cosine. So there's an interesting relationship between sine and cosine, all right? And as well, between tan and sec squared, okay? So between tan and sec squared. So there's an interesting relationship between both of them. So between sine and cosine and tan and sec squared, all right? So usually what I always tell students is that just write S C minus S minus C. Are you seeing it? So minus S and minus C. Okay. So now when you differentiate sine, so if you remember in the last video, I told you, for those that have watched my video on differentiation, I said when you differentiate, okay? When you differentiate, okay? When you differentiate sine to give you cosine. When you differentiate cosine, it will give you minus sine. When you differentiate minus sine, it will give you minus cosine. And when you differentiate minus cosine, it's going to give you sine. I've talked about this earlier, all right? Now, it's exactly the same thing with integration. So when you have sine, cosine, minus sine, minus cosine, now we have integration now, okay? So what is exactly the same thing, but instead of you going clockwise, you'll be going anti-clockwise. So sine will give you, sorry, cosine, when you integrate cosine to give you sine. When you integrate sine, is going to give you minus cosine. When you integrate minus cosine, is going to give you minus sine. And when you integrate minus sine, is going to give you cosine. So this is the relationship between sine and cosine. So when you differentiate sine, it will give you cosine. Then cosine, when you differentiate cosine, minus sine, minus cosine, minus sine will give you minus cosine. Now the reverse is for the integration. Now the same thing between sec squared and tan. Okay? Now when you differentiate tan, it's going to give you sec squared. So when you differentiate, okay? And when you integrate sec squared, it's going to give you tan. So when you integrate, are you seeing it? So that is the relationship. So tan and sec squared, the same thing. When you differentiate tan, you get sec squared. And when you integrate sec squared, you will get tan. Also, for integration and differentiation, the same thing. When you go clockwise, you are differentiating. And when you go anti-clockwise, you're integrating. Now I'm going to talk about the 5 steps, okay? The 5 steps of integrating cosine, all right? So basically, it's still the same steps you use for both cosine, you use for both sine, and you also use for sec squared. So in this video and in subsequent 2 videos, when I talk about sine and sec squared, I'm going to basically repeat the same 5 steps in each of them, okay? All right, so let's get cracking then. So what are the 5 steps? So let's start. So the 5 steps on how to integrate, the first thing you have to do is that you have to convert the trigonometry sign to the appropriate integral form. So basically, based on what we talked about here, So you have to convert. So if, for instance, you had cosine, you have to convert it to sine. So that means you have to convert the trigonometry sign to the appropriate integral form. So number one, you have to convert is right. Get this out of the way. So you have to convert the trigonometry sign. Okay, to the appropriate integral form. Number two, now after you've converted the trigonometry sign, the next thing you have to do is that you have to add a variable from the question to step one. So that means in the aim of this is so that you can get an integrated trigonometry function and variable in the bracket, okay? So you have to add the variable from the question to step one to give an integrated trigonometry function and variable in the brackets. So don't worry, I'm going to solve an example to explain this. So I'm going to just write down the 3 steps. Then I'm going to write solve an example to explain what I'm talking about. Then when you're done with this, the third step you have to then do is that you then have to differentiate the variable in the bracket. So when you're done with this, the next step is to differentiate the variable in the bracket. Then when you're done differentiating the variable in the bracket, then you now divide the answer you get from step 2 by that of step 3, okay? So you divide step 2 with step 3. Is that okay? Then finally, number 5, you then add C, and only if it's indefinite. Okay? So you convert the trigonometry sign to the appropriate integral form. After that, you add the variable from the question to step 1, and you have to give an integrated trigonometry function in the variable of the bracket, okay? All right. Then when you've done that, you then differentiate the variable in the bracket. Then you now divide step 2 with step 3. Then you now add C. Okay, let me pick an example here. All right. So we can explain this. So let's say, for example, okay, number 1, we were told to integrate, okay, cos 4x in respect to dx. Okay, now let's go. Step 1. We have to convert the trigonometry sign to the appropriate what? Integral form, right? So now the question you need to ask now, what question do we have here? We have cosine. So step 1, we have what? Cosine. So how do you convert cosine? So it's going to be sine, cosine, minus cosine. So when you integrate cosine, is going to give you what? Sine. So that means step 1, this cosine has to be converted to what? Sine. Okay? So step 2, okay? So what do we have in step 2? We have to add the variable from the question to step 1 to give an integrated trigonometry function and a variable in bracket. So that means we're going to write, so now instead of us having cosine, it's going to become sine. Then this 4x is going to be here. So this is what you're going to have in step 2. Now step 3, what do? Step 3 now said differentiate the variable in the bracket, okay? So now what is the variable in the bracket? 4x. So now we have to differentiate 4x. When differentiate 4x is going to give you 4. Now step 4, what do? You have to divide step 2 with step 3. So step 2, I had sine 4x divided by step 3, I had what? 4. And I'm going to add step 5, which is to add c, because it is an indefinite what? Integration. So basically, when you integrate cos 4x, it's going to give you sine 4x divided by 4 plus what? Plus c. Okay? So let's pick another example here. Let's say we had number 2, you're told to integrate, let's say 2 cos x, for instance, in respect to x. Okay. So remember, I always tell you, when you're integrating and you have a constant, you have to bring out the what? You have to bring out a constant. So you now have what? Cos x. So we're integrating cos x. All right. So let's go. So step 1. All right. So we have sine, cosine, minus sine, minus cosine. So remember, I told you in this video, we're going to just focus on cosine in this video. So when integrate cosine, it's going to give you what? Sine. So that means the cosine, when you integrate that, is going to give you what? Sine. Then step 2, we then have to rewrite this with a variable. So it's going to be 2 into bracket. So sine what? X. Okay? So you replace the cos with sine. Then step 3, we are going to differentiate the variable in the bracket. So let's differentiate the variable in the bracket. So what's the variable we have this time? We have x. So that means if we differentiate x, it's going to give you what? 1. Then step 4, we then have to divide step 2 with step 1. So it's going to give us 2 sine x divided by 1. And step 5, we then add what? C to it. So plus c. So you can easily write this again as 2 sine x plus c as what? As the answer for that. Maybe I should just add one more example, maybe make a more interesting example. So let's say we have something like cos 9x minus 2 in respect to dx. So we are told to integrate cos 9x minus 2 in respect to dx. Step 1, we have to change the trig identity. So we have sine, cosine, minus cosine. So when you integrate cosine, it's going to give you what? Sine. So that means cos, when you integrate cosine, okay, it's going to give us what? Sine. Then on step 2, we then have to rewrite this with the variable in the bracket. So it's going to be, instead of having cos, now we're going to have sine. Then we have 9x minus 2. All right. Then step 3, the next thing we need to do is that we then have to differentiate what is in the bracket. So we have 9x minus 2. All right. So when you differentiate it, 9x is to give you 9. And when you differentiate minus 2, it give you 0. So that means when you differentiate this, is going to give us 9. Step 4, okay, we then have to divide step 2 with step 3. So you're going to give us sine 9x minus 2 divided by what? 9. Okay, divided by 9. Then step 5, what do? you then add c to what you have here. So remember, I always say is that you only add c when you are talking about indefinite what integration, and that is that for that. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you some example to try. So you can try this example. You can check notes with your colleagues or your friends, or you can put it in the comment section so that other subscribers can also give their answers as well and see if you're correct. So we have, let's say we have cos 3x plus 2 in respect to dx. So you're meant to integrate this. Number 2, you're meant to integrate cos 7x in respect to dx. And number 3, you're meant to integrate 4/3 cos 3x in respect to what? Dx. Okay, so we have this, for instance, and you're told to solve this. All right, try this and solve it, and let's see if you get the same thing. And so that'll bring us to the end of the video for how to integrate cosine, all right? So like I said, there's an interesting relationship between cosine and sine. When you're going clockwise, you differentiate. When you're going anti-clockwise, you integrate. And also for sec squared and tan. And like I said, this 5 steps is this exactly the same thing for sine, cosine, and sec squared. So I'm going to say the same thing as well, the same 5 steps when I get to sine in the next video. The video after that, I'm going to talk about sec squared, and we'll keep on moving that way. All right. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so that when I upload the video on sine, you'll be the first person to know. All right. So I'm going to see you soon, where we'll talk about how do we integrate sine AX. So see you soon.